The Kennedy name will always weigh in American consciousness. Graceful elegance colliding with tragedy, bold frontiers meeting unbridled optimism. But beyond the Camelot mythology lies something rather more tangible. An extraordinary collection of properties that served as stages for one of America's most compelling dynasties. Undoubtedly, these houses tell stories that policy papers and speeches cannot. From Cape Cod clapboard to Palm Beach Mediterranean, each property bears witness to moments that shifted the course of American history. And the architectural choices themselves speak volumes. Traditional forms housing revolutionary ideas, classic facades concealing rooms where the future was plotted over cocktails and coffee. Thus, on today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we examine 5 properties that defined the Kennedy era. These homes hosted everyone from heads of state to Hollywood royalty, serving as both private sanctuaries and public theaters. Through their walls, windows, and meticulously manicured grounds, we trace the rise of a family whose taste in real estate matched their political ambitions, grand, strategic, and absolutely unforgettable. So let us start where any proper Kennedy tour should, the compound that launched 1,000 political careers. On the Massachusetts coast, where Nantucket Sound meets old money sensibilities, stands the Kennedy compound, the family's most celebrated address outside of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Joseph P. Kennedy spotted the main house in 1928 and immediately recognized what every shrewd investor knows: location trumps everything. The patriarch transformed what began as a modest 1904 summer cottage into command central for America's most photogenic political dynasty. This metamorphosis reflected Joseph's particular genius for seeing potential where others saw merely pleasant views. Here, 9 Kennedy children learned to sail before they could properly tie their shoes, racing dinghies across the Sound while absorbing lessons in competition that would serve them rather well in Washington. Summer days unfolded in a blur of tennis matches, touch football games that drew blood, and sailing expeditions where losing meant genuine shame at the dinner table. The compound evolved like the family's ambitions, strategically and relentlessly. John F. Kennedy snagged a neighboring property in 1956, followed by Brother Robert's adjacent acquisition, expanding the Kennedy footprint with the determination of medieval lords consolidating territory. Edward Ted Kennedy joined the land grab in 1959, creating a 3-house fiefdom that would make any dynasty proud. John F. Kennedy ran his 1960 presidential campaign from these rooms, transforming parlors into war rooms, where strategy sessions ran late into the night, fueled by ambition and excellent scotch. International dignitaries discovered that diplomatic negotiations felt less formal when conducted with sand beneath your toes. The compound became a curious hybrid, part private retreat, part geopolitical chessboard. The architecture speaks fluent Cape Cod. White clapboard siding, weathered shingles, and those essential wraparound porches from which to survey one's domain. The main house stretches across 9,000 square feet, housing 12 bedrooms because apparently, in Kennedy mathematics, you always need room for visiting dignitaries, campaign staff, and the occasional movie star. 4 reception rooms accommodate everything from family christenings to cabinet meetings, while the kitchen, expanded to industrial proportions, churned out clam chowder for senators and lobster rolls for lords. The property's ocean views became legendary backdrops for presidential photo ops, those porches witnessing everything from policy debates to family celebrations. During JFK's presidency, the Secret Service turned this seaside sanctuary into the summer White House, installing direct phone lines to Washington and transforming guest bedrooms into communication centers. The circular driveways, once meant for leisurely arrivals, became precisely choreographed zones for motorcades and security details. Throughout its evolution, the compound maintained its essential character, comfortable without being ostentatious, substantial without screaming wealth. 3 full houses, guest quarters, and those twin driveways created a self-contained world where privacy and politics coexisted, where child's birthday parties might share a weekend with discussions about the Berlin crisis. The compound's latest chapter began in 2012 when the main house passed to the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate philanthropy with a $3.2 million price tag courtesy of leftover campaign funds. Senator Kennedy's widow, Victoria, orchestrated this transition, honoring Ted's promise to his mother, Rose, that the family seat would ultimately serve the public good. The Institute promises educational programs and eventual public access, transforming rooms where history happened into classrooms where history will be taught. Future generations will walk the same walls where American royalty once plotted their next move, though presumably with less champagne and fewer celebrities in attendance. Between 1961 and 1963, the White House transformed from government housing into something altogether more ambitious. John F. Kennedy brought youth and energy to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, while behind the scenes, the building itself was undergoing its own reinvention. The Kennedy administration unfolded against a backdrop of Cold War tensions, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Berlin crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the bold promise of the Apollo program. Yet amid these world-shaping events, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy embarked on a mission that would fundamentally alter how Americans viewed their most famous address. She enlisted decorator Dorothy Parrish and began what would become the most significant restoration in the building's modern history. What started with a modest budget quickly expanded, driven by Mrs. Kennedy's conviction that the White House should exemplify the best in American design. She believed every piece should carry historical weight. Authentic period furniture, significant artworks, and decorative objects that told the story of the Republic. Storage rooms were searched, private collectors approached, and museums consulted in the hunt for pieces worthy of the nation's house. Her vision went beyond aesthetics. Each room would serve as a chapter in American history, carefully curated to educate as well as impress. The staterooms, green, blue, and red, became galleries of American achievement, their contents chosen with museum-quality precision. On February 14, 1962, Jacqueline Kennedy invited 56 million Americans into these transformed spaces through a televised tour. She guided viewers through rooms where presidents had shaped history, explaining the significance of each restored detail with scholarly precision and natural grace. The broadcast revolutionized how Americans thought about their cultural heritage, making the White House accessible while maintaining its dignity. The program's success extended well beyond just ratings, sparking a national conversation about historic preservation. The Kennedys also transformed the White House into a cultural center. Pablo Casals performed in the East Room for the first time since the 1930s. Nobel Prize winners dined alongside artists and writers. Jazz floated through staterooms that had known only classical music. This cultural programming was carefully orchestrated, demonstrating that American power included not just military might, but artistic achievement. Jacqueline Kennedy's establishment of the White House Historical Association ensured that these changes would endure. The organization would protect the mansion's integrity, maintaining standards for future administrations and preventing the historic rooms from sliding back into bureaucratic neglect. You see, the Kennedy White House represented a new synthesis of power and culture. They proved that serious governance and sophisticated style could coexist, that discussing nuclear strategy in the morning didn't preclude hosting accomplished artists in the evening. The restoration made the building a teaching institution, a living museum where every object served both aesthetic and educational purposes. When the Kennedy presidency ended tragically in November 1963, the transformation was complete. The White House had evolved from merely the president's residence into a symbol of American cultural confidence. In Palm Beach, where money speaks quietly and estates compete for ocean frontage, Joseph P. Kennedy found his winter paradise in 1933. The patriarch paid $110,000 for a Mediterranean-style mansion that would become the family's cold weather command center, a bargain considering what transpired within its walls. Now, this strategic acquisition firmly planted the Kennedy flag in America's most exclusive resort town, where industrial titans and their trophy wives had long held court. The estate commanded prime Atlantic oceanfront, its grounds sprawling across manicured lawns dotted with coconut palms that swayed in the salt breeze. A swimming pool gleamed like a sapphire set in emerald grass, while tennis courts stood ready for morning matches before the Florida heat made exertion inadvisable. Here, the Kennedys could conduct their particular brand of business, part politics, part pleasure, and all power, while maintaining the fiction of leisure. The property gained its highest profile during John F. Kennedy's ownership, earning the designation Winter White House, as naturally as Palm Beach acquires Bentleys. Within these sun-drenched rooms, away from Washington's watchful eyes and winter chill, Kennedy crafted significant portions of profiles in courage. The Pulitzer Prize-winning work emerged from quiet mornings when the future president could write undisturbed, The Atlantic providing both soundtrack and inspiration. Later, these same spaces witnessed the birth of his inaugural address. These immortal words about torches being passed first, taking shape with ocean views as backdrop. But the estate functioned as much more than a simple writing retreat. Direct phone lines connected the Palm Beach property to the actual White House, ensuring that presidential business never truly took a vacation. Diplomatic cables arrived with the morning papers, and cabinet members learned to pack both swim trunks and briefing books. The tennis courts hosted matches where ambassadors discovered the president's backhand was as formidable as his foreign policy. Architecturally, the property bore the signature of Addison Meisner, the society architect who essentially invented Palm Beach's aesthetic in the 1920s. Originally designed in 1923 for department store heir Rodman Wanamaker, the mansion embodied Meisner's genius for marrying Mediterranean romance with American comfort. When the Kennedys took possession, they wisely retained Maurice Facio for renovations, Meisner's protege who understood that improving perfection required a delicate touch. The family's modifications respected the original vision while adapting to Kennedy-scale entertaining. The family room expanded to accommodate clan gatherings that resembled small conventions. The tennis court received upgrades befitting presidential-level play. The swimming pool grew to Hollywood proportions because in Palm Beach, modesty is considered poor form. These changes enhanced rather than erased Meisner's blueprint, maintaining the estate's essential character while preparing it for its role in history. The approved changes encompassed interior refreshments and exterior preservation, ensuring the property would continue embodying both architectural excellence and historical significance. Each modification was scrutinized to guarantee harmony within the estate's storied past. These days, the Winter White House stands for much more than just a seasonal residence. It represents the Kennedy genius for positioning. Thus, while the compound in Hyannis Port nurtured the family's roots and ambitions, this Palm Beach estate would later provide solace in tragedy, becoming Jackie Kennedy's first refuge after Dallas before she sought the anonymity of Manhattan's vertical geography. In 1964, Jacqueline Kennedy traded Camelot for Fifth Avenue, purchasing a 15th-floor penthouse at 1040 Fifth Avenue that would shelter her for the next 3 decades. The acquisition marked her transformation from First Lady to private citizen, though private remains relative when your address overlooks Central Park and your neighbors include museum trustees and pharmaceutical heirs. Fifth Avenue represented more than just geography. It was a statement of intent. The building's limestone facade and white-gloved doorman promised discretion, that most valuable Manhattan commodity. From her windows, Jackie commanded views of Central Park that real estate agents would describe as forever, though nothing in her life had proven quite so permanent. The apartment itself sprawled across 5,000 square feet of pre-war elegance. 5 bedrooms provided space for children, staff, and the occasional visiting dignitary who still addressed her as Mrs. Kennedy. The herringbone floors had witnessed decades of proper Manhattan living before the most famous widow in America walked across them. High ceilings accommodated both her collection of antiques and the weight of history she carried. A wood-paneled library housed volumes on art, history, and architecture, subjects that had become her second career. Wood-burning fireplaces offered warmth during Manhattan where even grief needed thawing. The interiors reflected Jackie's evolved aesthetic. Less official residence, more sophisticated refuge. Gone were the constraints of public property and congressional budgets. She could indulge her Francophile tendencies without explaining them to taxpayers, fill rooms with objects chosen for beauty rather than diplomatic value. The apartment became her workshop for a new life constructed with the same attention to detail she'd brought to the White House restoration. During her residency, Jackie transformed from political widow to cultural force. She battled to save Grand Central Terminal from the wrecking ball, proving that her preservationist instincts extended beyond domestic interiors. St. Bartholomew's Church owed its continued existence to her advocacy, as did numerous other Manhattan landmarks threatened by developers with more money than taste. The property's subsequent history reads like a wealth management seminar. David Koch acquired it before Glenn Dubin paid $32 million in 2006. Thomas and Marjorie Lerman secured it in 2016 for $32.5 million, having purchased it from Edgar Bronfman Jr., who had acquired it in 2008. The Lermans undertook renovations that respected Jackie's ghost while updating systems for contemporary oligarch comfort. Today, the residence stands as a monument to second acts. The penthouse where America's most famous widow rebuilt her life now shelters other fortunes and other stories. Yet something of Jackie's presence lingers in those herringbone patterns, in the library's built-in shelves, in the windows that frame Central Park like a constantly changing masterpiece. The apartment embodies her final transformation, from political partner to independent woman, from public figure to private citizen who happened to be publicly fascinating. Fifth Avenue provided the perfect setting for this evolution, offering both sanctuary and stage. In New York, she could be simultaneously visible and invisible, a paradox the city has always understood. While Jackie was crafting her new life in Manhattan's sky, her brother-in-law Robert was creating a different kind of Kennedy kingdom in the Virginia countryside. In 1955, Robert and Ethel Kennedy paid cash for a Georgian mansion in McLean, Virginia that would become Washington's most sought-after dinner invitation. The red brick estate sat on 6 acres of Virginia countryside, close enough to power for convenience, far enough for conspiracies. The purchase timing proved prescient. Robert's role as chief counsel for the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations meant work often followed him home. Hickory Hill wore its Georgian architecture like a well-cut suit, formal but not stiff. The facade presented symmetrical windows and classical proportions that whispered rather than shouted its importance. Inside, spacious rooms flowed into one another with the ease of good conversation. The Kennedys filled these spaces with their particular brand of controlled chaos. Children, dogs, and dinner guests created a constant hum of activity. Ethel Kennedy transformed the estate into an intellectual salon disguised as a family home. The 1960s saw Hickory Hill's evolution from private residence to semi-public forum. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the Harvard historian who doubled as Kennedy family chronicler, organized what would become known as the Hickory Hill Seminars. These gatherings assembled Washington's sharpest minds around the Kennedy dining table, where Supreme Court justices debated journalists over pot roast. Cabinet members argued with academics while children raced through the hallways, creating a uniquely American blend of serious discourse and domestic mayhem. The seminars addressed everything from civil rights to foreign policy, with participants chosen for intelligence rather than ideology. The estate's grounds provided additional stages for the Kennedy brand of politics and play. Touch football games on the back lawn became legendary for their violence. Attorneys and ambassadors limping back to their cars with grass stains and grudges. The swimming pool hosted equally competitive aquatic battles where drowning seemed preferable to losing. These activities served a purpose beyond exercise, establishing hierarchies and testing loyalties in ways committee meetings never could. Robert Kennedy's assassination in 1968 ended Hickory Hill's role as a political salon. Ethel remained in the house with her 11 children, the estate shifting from power center to memorial. The intellectual gathering ceased, replaced by the quieter rhythm of a widow raising a small nation of Kennedys. In 2009, technology entrepreneur Alan Kay purchased Hickory Hill, bringing Silicon Valley money to old Washington Power. The new owner respected the property's heritage while updating it for contemporary life, replacing wire services, security systems more sophisticated than security service details. The estate maintains its architectural integrity even as its purpose has shifted. Preservation efforts have kept the mansion's essential character intact. The red brick still glows in the afternoon light, the proportions still please the eye, and the rooms still flow with practiced grace. Now designated a National Historic Landmark, Hickory Hill stands protected from developers who might subdivide history for profit. The estate represents a particular moment in American political history when serious people believed dinner parties could change the world. Maybe they were right. Policies debated over brandy in the Hickory Hill Library shaped legislation that altered millions of lives. They remain standing testimonies that in America, architecture and power have always been intimate partners. With that said, we'd love to see you in the comments. Which of these old money mansions of the Kennedys is your favorite and why? We look forward to hearing your unique taste below. We appreciate your time. Be sure to visit the video description and join our free Substack newsletter if you'd like. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Mansions, and cheers.